I'm going to press on because I know that many of you will want to get your tuppence worth into this debate, although it's probably worth a lot more than tuppence. It is this: why will the West not cut ties with Saudi Arabia? Well, I could spend the next 60 minutes giving all the reasons, but I don't have time to do that because I want to hear from you. But just the first 3 or 4 reasons will probably suffice. But before I give them, I want to make this parenthesis. One day, the West will cut ties with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is making a very grave mistake if it confuses the interest of Western countries in them, and in particular in their money, with love, affection, or respect of any kind. Let me tell them, as someone who spent almost 30 years in the corridors of power in Westminster, a man who's spoken with prime ministers, foreign ministers, and senior diplomats in London and throughout the Arab region, nobody respects the Saudi regime. In fact, they laugh at them. They laugh at them except when they are being revolted by them. But that, of course, is not how they behave in public. The Saudi regime will always find members of the British royal family, members of the British government, ready to rush to their side, kiss their noses, at the very least their noses, in order to go on profiting from them. The West has no interest in the integrity of Saudi Arabia. It cares nothing about the sovereignty of Saudi Arabia. It would be just as happy if Saudi Arabia broke up into several countries, just like other Arab countries are beginning to do. The only interest that the West has in Saudi Arabia is its money, the black gold that God gave them underneath their feet, and what they do with the petrodollars they obtain from the sale of it. Now, I don't have to dwell on what it is that they do. The cleanest use of the petrodollars of the Saudi regime is that they lodge it in Western banks. They buy Western property with it. They shop for Western weapons with it. They, shall I say, gamble some of it away in Western casinos. And there is no vice, there is no wickedness, there is no depth to what the Saudi regime will squander its people's money on. And as long as they squander it in our cities, in our countries, here in the West, we are perfectly happy. Now, the West is growing tired, it's growing skeptical. It looks at ISIS and Al-Qaeda, spawned by the mindset of those who rule Saudi Arabia. At least their public mindset, their private behavior seems to suggest that Wahhabis is the very last thing they are. Salafis is the very last thing that they are. If you're a Wahhabi, if you're a Salafist, you don't behave in the West the way the rulers of Saudi Arabia behave. So why will the West not cut ties? Because it has a puppet regime in control of the world's biggest producer of oil. It has a puppet regime that will endlessly recycle the petrodollars from that energy. And it has a regime that will pay for any madcap scheme that Western regimes come up with. In the 1980s, it was Saudi Arabia that funded what became Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. In 2015, it is Saudi Arabia that is funding Jabhat al-Nusra, the Al-Qaeda franchise in Syria, and people in Saudi Arabia who provided the seed money, the original launchpad money for what has come to be known as ISIL. They have a pliant puppet regime that rules its people, not in the interests of those people, but in the interests of other people. It has, and this is my last example, though there are many more I could give, it has a Saudi regime that will not lift a finger against the Zionist state, will not give help to those who are lifting a finger to defend and try to rescue the Palestinian people under occupation, under siege, under annexation. It will not pursue a policy which is in any way against the interests, against the wishes of Western powers. And I said lastly, here's lastly, it has a regime that can be used as a cat's paw against other governments, states in the area. But that too is running out of efficacy, because the West, you see, has made a decision to have peace with Iran. And therefore, Saudi Arabia has become a kind of embarrassing elderly relative whose table manners and whose conduct are embarrassing you in front of your smart friends. So increasingly, you'll keep that embarrassing elderly relative on a rocking chair up in the attic, hoping that not too many people will notice. That's why I believe the West have not yet cut ties, but it's also the reason why I believe the West will eventually cut ties with Saudi Arabia. Let's hear from Amal in the United Kingdom to kick the show off this evening. Amal, welcome.
Hello, Church. Good evening.
Good evening.
The reason